As a disclaimer, some of our episodes discuss topics that may not be fit for a younger audience. Some episodes also contain some swearing. This show was produced by the Geek Happy Network, creators of the very best in audible Oracle entertainment. If you enjoy listening to Represented, remember to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
And so I was in a similar vein, I only auditioned like twice for professional productions when I was back in Australia. And I remember one time I went to an open casting call for Saved by the Bell for Disney. One of my classmates.
Hello and welcome to the Represented podcast. I'm your host Nyex. Hello to our viewership. And today I have a guest with me, someone that I met not too long ago, and someone that has a lot of interesting things going on in her life, and someone that has interesting perspectives too, I think, and hopefully we'll get into some of the reasons I think why. And welcome to the Represented podcast, Jaymee, Mac.
Thank you for having me.
And Jaymee is an actor or a thespian, or how would you describe what you do?
It's interesting because I think this year, when I first started auditioning, I identified as an actor, and then this year I started producing my own short films, and so now I think I identify more as a filmmaker as opposed to just an actor. I mean, I'll still introduce myself as an actor, particularly if I want to get cast in something. But I think making my own films has taught me more about acting than, not to say that acting classes aren't valuable, because they are super valuable, but I think having a holistic understanding of the craft better enables me to make smart choices as an actor, and I think any actor would benefit from learning behind the camera stuff. Yeah.
And shout out to Philip Planta, who you know as well, who was on a previous episode on here, who spoke all about film and his own creative journey, which was really interesting. And we spoke about Phil as well, when we just first met.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have. I don't know if I would have met you without Phil, because Phil, I was looking for writers for my next short film, which is a mockumentary, and so he was the one who, within 5 minutes of me asking him on Facebook, hey, do you know any good funny writers? He immediately puts me in a Facebook group with Mick and Mike, or just Mick, I think.
Yeah. Those are producers on the Geek Happy Network. Shout out to them.
And I don't know, they've been great to work with. So we're currently workshopping the script. We've had hot pot and Japanese barbecue. I like to have food when we're having meetings. And then through Mick met you. So Phil really is the granddaddy, granddaddy producer of Vancouver.
He seems to be the sensei of film in Vancouver. Yeah, that's awesome. So how did you get into film yourself? Was it something you did from early on, or? So
it's funny. Somebody asked me how I got into acting at my agency Christmas party, and I realized I gave a different answer than any other time that I've been asked. So I think the actual answer is when I was little, I asked my mom for singing lessons because I loved singing. I remember telling myself, there was this girl called Nikki Webster. I'm from Australia. So if I switch to my Australian accent, you'll know the difference. But basically, when I was, 9 or something, she became a famous singer because she sang in the Australian, Australia was hosting the Olympics, and she was 12. So I said to myself, I'm going to be a famous singer by the time I'm 12. obviously that panned out. But I begged my mom for singing lessons, and instead she enrolled me in acting classes.
Oh, wow. How did that happen?
I don't know that I've ever asked her. My suspicion is that acting classes are a lot cheaper than singing lessons.
Okay.
Like, just music lessons in general are really expensive, and I was
Okay.
already studying piano at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe she didn't want to distract from the piano.
Okay.
But yeah.
So was like piano, when piano was kind of her thing, she like kind of introduced
Oh,
that to
no,
you?
it was, so I have an older brother. He's
Okay.
older by 6 years, and he's a musician. But I think I saw my brother taking piano lessons, and I
okay.
was like, I want to do that.
Yeah,
or like
yeah.
I saw my brother doing karate lessons, and I was like, I want to do that.
Okay.
But then I think my mom enrolled me in dance lessons. I don't know. There's some like gender norms at play there. Yeah, so I guess I have my mom to thank for, or maybe I would have found my way to it, because I've always been very dramatic and emotionally sensitive, which
Dramatic.
the stereotype is true. Actors are very
Yeah.
like,
What are examples of times before you were into actual acting that you acted up in reality?
So the one best example. These are great questions. Oh my god.
Thank you.
Um,
No one's ever told me that.
Well, I don't know. I made one of my majors at my first degree was journalism, so I think I really appreciate when good questions are asked.
Nice. I'm glad.
But I remember when I was in, I think, grade 1, my class was reenacting The Ugly Duckling.
Okay.
And so the teacher said, all right, I'm going to decide who's going to be the ugly duckling. So in order for me to do that, if you want to play the ugly duckling, I want you to act sad right now. And I just remember thinking, okay, what do I do when I'm sad? Because immediately every other person that I was competing against, I guess, immediately starts going, wah, meh, meh.
yeah.
And I thought, well, when I'm sad, what I do is I curl up in a ball and I like hunch my knees to my like bury my face in my knees, and I just like cut myself off from the outside world. And it's funny thinking about that now, because yeah, pretty consistently like that would be what I would do, and I guess I still do that emotionally, just not physically. Like I can get kind of closed off and avoid everything around me, but as a child, it's interesting. Children are interesting because they really fully express every emotion they're feeling on their face or in their body. So I guess that's what I did, and that was realism, right?
Yeah. I guess the fact that you quickly accessed like your truth,
Yeah.
like you know what I mean?
Yeah. And so I was the ugly duckling.
Oh.
In a similar vein, I only auditioned like twice for professional productions when I was back in Australia. And I remember one time I went to an open casting call for Saved by the Bell, I think, for Disney, which one of my classmates ended up getting cast in.
Oh, cool.
But similar thing where there's like, I don't know, 20 of us kids in a room, and they were getting us to do all these kind of different exercises. And at one point they say, all right, now I want all of you to do something to like stand out. Just whatever you can think of, just stand out. So again, similar thing. Everybody in the room starts jumping and blah, blah, blah. And some of them are very athletic. They're like doing cartwheels and shit. It's kind of like pandemonium. And I think, well, being different isn't about necessarily being the loudest sometimes. So I did the exact same thing, I think. I just like sat there real still, like cross-legged or something, and just like stared at the camera.
Yeah.
And I actually wrote my email address wrong on the sign-up forms. They ended up like hunting me down, I guess, because they really liked that. And then at the callback, I didn't end up booking the part, and this is why. Because when I read the audition scene, I think I read the character as like an airhead, and I kind of gave her like a stereotypical Valley Girl accent.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, that was great, but could you do it more like, you know, Phoebe from Friends? And at the time, I hadn't watched Friends. I've since watched every episode and like had a marathon with a friend where we made T-shirts saying, I'll be there for you on another T-shirt if you're there for me too. At the time, I didn't know what Phoebe was like, so I just kind of like amped up the Valley Girl and didn't get cast. So unfortunately, I'm not a Disney child, but...
And so you mentioned something interesting, which I guess is kind of like where this podcast usually goes, in terms of like you being able to access that kid who like notices the difference between like you are kind of aware of how you really are, and that you didn't have to cover that up like early in life, where like all the other kids would do what all the other kids would do. Why? Like, what's that about? Why are you this way?
Something that I think is very common with other actors is that we tend to be very introspective and analytical. And for me, at least, that comes from a place of I've just always been incredibly emotional, to a detriment sometimes. And I think I can't help but like wear my heart on my sleeve. I roll my eyes because I feel like the older I get, the more cliche sayings make sense, and I just want to say them because
I agree 1,000%. It's like every day one random like line my mom said I'm like, ew, like no.
You'll understand when you're older.
I'm like, oh, like stop, like get out of my head. I totally understand.
So I think, because I was always just feeling things really deeply.
But you didn't really have a way to articulate it at the time, did you?
I kind of just exploded it in everybody's direction whenever. So really, I think it's funny because I was explaining to somebody the other day that I think there's two different kinds of actors, or people who want to be actors. There's actors like me, I guess, who have just always been very in touch with their feelings. And then there's people who want to be actors but struggle to be vulnerable, struggle to open up, and so their major challenge is to be emotional, whereas for me, being emotional is the easy part. It's everything else around it that's more difficult.
Like reeling it back, for example?
Yeah, or trying to learn how to be a healthy, stable human being, which I think is a common experience, but I think for me in particular, like my major... particularly this year, my major goal has been, how can I be a happier person? And I think we might have talked about this before, but I think fundamentally, the way you become a better actor is you become a better human being, because that's all acting is. It's being human. So if you can better figure out how to... I think no matter who you are, it's like trying to figure out what other people like. So if you're maybe a bit more emotionally damaged, trying to figure out what it's like to not be emotionally damaged, and then vice versa. Like if you've never struggled with emotions, in some ways that might be harder to figure out how to reach that depth. And I've talked to other people who have also struggled with mental illness, and it's interesting going through our own personal journeys to become healthier. It becomes harder to tap into that emotional well, because now that you know what it's like to be healthy, you don't want to go back there. Whereas before, when it's just at the surface, it's really easy to tap in. But at the same time, I would notice. So for example, for me, when I get upset, I tend to self-victimize and get sad. Whereas I know other people who never get sad, but they tend to get angry. And so for me, in scenes, anger is a much more difficult emotion to play than sadness. And so I have to work that much harder to get angry. And vice versa for friends.
And like, I'm curious, as a kid with like going through those outbursts and stuff, what about your family around you? Like, do you have siblings and stuff? How did that play out at home?
I wonder if my family are gonna listen to this podcast.
Sorry in advance.
It's interesting because now I live on the other side of the world from them. I think I followed in my mother's footsteps because she also kind of left home-ish. I mean, Brunei is very close to Malaysia, but she essentially left her home country of Malaysia to go to Brunei. And I think I just took that one step further and went from Australia all the way to Canada. Something about wanting to chase your own independence. My mom, she shows her love in different ways. So the way that we communicate in regards to emotions is very different. So I think, in some ways, she wasn't necessarily equipped to deal with my emotionality. And I recently talked to my counselor about this, but because my emotions weren't necessarily always validated, I would get in trouble for crying and stuff. That kind of contributed to kind of a lifelong journey with anxiety. And I think something that I also talked to my counselor about is that I am trying to learn to be better with giving myself permission to ask for empathy from other people and also for empathy for myself. Because I think before I didn't want to validate negative emotions because I thought that would be encouraging them.
Mm-hmm.
But my counselor kind of helped me realize that if you just acknowledge them, that helps you let go. And then we were kind of talking about how maybe that from like an evolutionary standpoint, we don't really remember like positive things as easily as negative things because maybe our body is perceiving them to be future dangers, and so we need to hang on to them. But
and social media doesn't help with that.
Yeah, but I recognize that I'm wired in a way where I'm categorizing a lot of things as dangerous that definitely aren't and probably aren't required for survival, and I should probably just like let them go. Circling back to the initial question about family, so I think my brother is kind of opposite from me. Like, I don't think he's the sad type. I think he, especially because my dad always lived in Macau, which is a different country. I think, I don't know, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think there's some pressure to like be like the male figure in a family. And so I think he always wanted, or maybe, don't want to put words in his mouth, but wanted to be stronger, and so more of the anger than like sadness type thing. So I think one of the other reasons I was drawn to acting was because I was like super socially awkward. I'm still like pretty awkward when I'm like intimidated by people. But
I'm glad I don't intimidate you because you haven't been awkward at all. Yet, sure. I guess. Yet.
But I didn't know how to like talk to people. Like, I remember one time working at my ice cream job in high school and consciously one summer holidays trying to look at my coworkers and be like, oh, they're asking how the weather is. I can ask how the weather is. Is this what small talk is? Whoa. So acting kind of, there's literally a script for how you should act. And, you know, it kind of exposes you to different social situations and kind of teaches you how to be. And it also, I think, if you're super, super socially awkward, then maybe you don't know how to navigate into certain experiences. One example being in a romantic relationship, and so acting kind of lets you experience things without necessarily having to get there in your own personal life.
Do you think this is just a random question, but do you think that's why a lot of child actors grow up too fast, I guess?
Maybe.
Or maybe not grow up too fast, but I guess you hear a lot of these tragic stories about child actors like in the media and stuff. I don't know if they hype it up, but the way you described being able to experience stuff outside of yourself, I'm wondering if certain actors are put through certain roles as kids.
Yeah, so I remember one of my acting coaches when I was a kid, when I first learned about substitution, which is essentially if you're doing a scene, trying to either think of a trigger, so a memory that'll put you in that emotional state, or even not a memory, but imagining yourself in a scenario that would elicit that same emotional response. And my teacher said, you got to be careful with this, because, and I don't think he used these words, but he was like, because some people end up real fucked up. And
I mean,
not those words, because he was nicer than that to children. But I remember we ran this exercise where I think I went up to the front of the class and he was like, okay, now think of a time where you were really sad. So I remembered when I was standing in line outside class, and then this guy in my class comes up and he goes, haha, there's the fat lady. I was real chubby as a kid. And I felt really sad. So I'm standing in front of class and I start crying. And then the teacher says, okay, now stop. And I was like, and I just kept bawling harder. And he's like, okay, go to the staircase and run up and down like 10 times until you stop. And so I did that, came back, calmed down. I think that's when he gave his spiel about, you got to be careful with this, because you got to, part of the job of being an actor is like learning how to do that, but then also letting go immediately. So it's funny, when I'm acting, I can get let go real easily. But in my personal life, I find that a lot harder. And I think with acting, it's because it's not necessarily your trauma that you're dealing with, per se. But yeah, like, for example, I know, have you seen 13 Reasons Why?
I've watched one episode.
Yeah. Very trigger warning heavy, that show. But I know that the actors on set, they had like care animals and counselors there because they're dealing with very heavy content there. And I think that's something that professional productions tend to do because, you know, your psyche can be at risk.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so was your family super supportive about your decision to go into acting then?
So in that regard, I think my older brother paved the way. I think he always wanted to do creative stuff, but I think he was pressured to do more stable, traditional stuff.
Yeah, because the man role and all that stuff. Yeah.
And I think also because I had always been so explosive with my desire to be creative. Like, I've always sung, danced, acted. And I did start off doing something semi-responsible. I started off doing arts law, but the law was to supplement my arts degree, and that's kind of like a really expensive waste of time if I'm not planning on using a law degree. And I think the other part being, although my dad is more of the pragmatic, less creative type, my mom like grew up playing guitar and singing and stuff, so I think in some ways part of her support might come from, you know, an underlying desire. And so like, because I also look pretty similar to her. It's like probably the closest you could get to living through somebody else's.
That's really cute. And parents do that anyway, so I'm pretty sure there's an element of that. Yeah. That's awesome. And so like, how about high school? Because I feel like with what you just described as a kid, because first of all, I relate to a lot of the stuff you said, because I grew up a chubby kid, and like I was telling you when we met, I was like, I didn't understand exactly why it was such a problem. Even now, because looking back, I'm like, I wasn't that big. Yeah. But like, that stuff definitely makes you, like, you form the way you're gonna deal with the rest of the world from those experiences, you know? So, like, of course, now I work out, and I work out hard, and there's obviously days when it's like, fuck all of you, whoever said a single thing about, but it's like, you know, most days, these days, it's like mind, body, soul, it's like, but then there's those days when it's like, this is for all you fucks who, like, you know, so, and just a lot of the anxiety stuff, which I've also had to deal with and go to, like, therapy for and deal with my own stuff, and moving abroad didn't really help. Kind of accelerated all those experiences and, like, juggling school, work, all this weird shit and stuff. But, and so, like, with that being your childhood, how about high school? Because high school is like, it's high school. So how did your high school period go?
Very similar.
And you were in where were you?
So Australia. So I moved to Canada 5 years ago.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, for my second college tertiary experience. So high school was similar. So I went to 2 different high schools. The first was like my local high school. It was a good high school, and then the second one was a selective high school called Mac Robinson's Girls High School, which is one of a few selective schools in the States. So basically, like a school you gotta take a test to get into. So the kind of school where you mention to somebody you go there, and they're like, "Oh, nerd school, gotcha." And I think that it's interesting because a lot of the girls I went to high school with experienced the same thing, where maybe they came from a school where they were the top of their class, and then all of a sudden they go to this school where they're like bottom or middle, and all of a sudden they don't know, like, their identity has just been switched around. And there's a lot more pressure to succeed. And I don't know. I mean, it was a good school. Like, I love being nerdy. But in terms of body image stuff, so when I was in grade 7, like the first year in high school in Australia, I had lost all my baby fat because I just got addicted to skipping jump rope.
My thing was running, because high school is when you lose weight, right?
Puberty helps, I guess. So. Metabolism, but then when I was 14, I was still obsessed with, like, I think by that time I had a normal weight, but I still saw myself as being overweight, and so I started dieting pretty hard. And I had an eating disorder at 14, and so for context, I was like 50 kilos to start off with, and then in 10 weeks I lost 10 kilos. Wow. Like, started having heart palpitations, could not maintain, like, a warm body temperature.
Yeah.
Like I would sit out in the sun on like a 40-degree day because still felt cold.
Wow.
My hair started falling out. And I think, and with that, I didn't admit to myself that I had an eating disorder until like years after I had like stopped the behaviors, but still kept up like the same negative mentality.
Yeah.
So I think that was a formative factor in like continuing to have like a very negative mindset throughout my teenage years. And like also when you have an eating disorder, like one of the symptoms is the person will become a social recluse because they don't want people judging them eating. And so I just like cut myself off from my friend group.
I was going to ask what was the friendship situation around you at the time.
Yeah, and I was going to youth group at the time, and I mean, I still don't identify as religious, but that was like one of the factors in me cutting myself off from there because like I just stopped completely going. I realized I didn't believe in a deity. Stopped going. That would have been the start of me arguing with my mom because you know your parent doesn't want you to die, so and you're just like, why do you want me to get fat? So that was a thing, and it's interesting because I ended up taking a few years off acting after high school. I mean, at university, I was in the drama society and I acted a couple things, but I didn't really do much like film and TV stuff. I remember when I came to Canada, and I originally came to Canada to do, I got the Women in Game Scholarship to do a Diploma of Game Design at Vancouver Film School. So I did that for a year, and I remember during that time they had the open casting call for like the new Star Wars reboot.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I remember considering auditioning, but then I remember getting really caught up in thinking about whether or not I was pretty enough or fit enough. And it's really funny thinking back now because it's weird because since then, you know, at the start of this year, I was cast as one of the lead actors in like a non-union sitcom pilot. And like the breakdown says, you know, cute, sexy, all that stuff. And so like, I guess I worry about that stuff less now, even as horrible as it sounds, because I've received external validation to the extent where like I worry about, I mean I still worry about it sometimes, but I worry about it less. So it's interesting to reflect upon like not even auditioning for something, but considering submitting for a self-tape and thinking like, am I
good enough?
Yeah, and I think I just had this preconception that to be an actor you had to be like flawless, and that's super not the case.
Yeah.
Although that said, most people who aren't flawless end up being like character actors. I mean, a little less so now, but.
What do you mean by character actor?
People who don't play like necessarily the lead or are playing like a specifically weird character, but they're not necessarily held up to be, you know.
I guess because of the like traditional or non-traditional looks, because of their, I guess because they're considered not traditionally beautiful. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. And then so like were you juggling acting during high school as well?
High school I was just taking lessons. So basically, from about the ages of 9 to 14, I was taking a weekly acting class at an Australian place called Screen Actors Australia or Screen Actors Studio. I think they've changed their name by now. Yeah. But it's basically rooted in like method acting technique. And so I would go there like every Saturday for 5 years.
Oh, okay.
And so that's like the fundamental of my training. And they're very rooted in like text analysis. And we would do, I think it was an hour of improv and then an hour of scene work. And then you would watch yourself back. So that's like the foundation of my technique.
Cool. And then, so now moving to Canada.
Yeah.
This is a different country, different culture and all that. How did yourself play out in that as well? Because that's a whole other experience,
so
I'm assuming.
Yeah, so Vancouver's very similar to Melbourne, except more weed.
Shout out to you.
Yeah. Very culturally similar, and I think I was explaining to somebody the other day, but I think I was explaining to Michael last night actually, because we both saw Soul Samurai together last night. Great show, by the way. And we both kind of went to university initially in a different state, and then moved to Vancouver after that. So we were already moving here from a place that wasn't our home, so we weren't leaving anything behind.
Okay.
So because we weren't leaving anything behind, it was a very easy move to make. Whereas if I were to move now, it'd be like tearing my roots out. It'd be really painful.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving here was easy, and at the time, I had just gotten this scholarship, and the reason I had gone to game design school was because at my original university, I took like a game design elective. And my teacher at the time, Jeffrey Brand, shout out to Jeff, I had pitched a game concept called The Only Girl in the World, set in a world where women are extinct, and you have to figure out, set in a parallel universe where women are extinct, and you have to figure out what happened in order to prevent it from happening in your own timeline.
Okay.
And my teacher told me, Jaymee, I don't know if I should tell you this, but I think you have the potential to change the games industry. And I was so freaking inspired.
Yeah.
So that was when I applied for the scholarship. So my first year here, it's like, I guess I wasn't really focused about missing stuff. I just like wanted to make waves. I was incredibly
ambitious, like
feminist in all of my school assignments, to the point where I think it might have peeved off some of my classmates.
That's really interesting. So like, sorry to interrupt, but like, do you still consider yourself a very like super feminist?
Yeah,
right now?
I mean, I like, you know, if you go by the definition of feminism as wanting equality for like gender equality, then yes.
But you've kind of moved from that person, I'm assuming, that you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I think that person was I think they were a little more inclined to jump on bandwagons without doing full research, and I'm not really into that.
The reason I'm like kind of asking is because I've also been going down this lane of kind of exploring the other side of social justice. And like I've been watching a lot of alternative perspectives to like the public discourse. And that's stuff that's considered, I guess, right wing. But it's kind of like I'm in a place where I'm starting to see, like, I don't know, the media, I think, is extremely on one side right now. That's why a lot of stuff looks a certain type of way. And which is why I'm asking, so when you're kind of breaking down the way you approached it before, I kind of want to see where your head was at, like why you saw it was, you know what I mean? Because I feel like I also had elements of that when I first came. Like I would just take on stuff that people would say and use it because it seems like, you know what I mean?
It's like ideally we should all be looking at things on a per issue basis, but nobody has the time to fully research every issue, and so you have to determine which voices in the media you're going to trust because you just don't have the energy to do that yourself. It's hard.
It is. It's actual work because like I realized just how much because I mean I really went deep into the people I've been watching and like people that I've considered like thought leaders and stuff, and now I'm looking at them like, wait, where were you trying to take me though? Because I'm like, I feel like for the longest time I was the same, where I would follow a lot of popular conversation, but then from people who have already framed it the way they want to, you know what I mean? And so I missed out on a whole world of perspectives that I'm now discovering, and I'm like, oh shit. You know, like, I'm like, okay, mental notes.
I mean, you know, it's great motivation for wanting to study economics. Kind of runs everything.
No, it's crazy. And so, like, how has your time in Canada been? Do you love it here? Or?
Vancouver's my home now. I mean, Vancouver's where I've become an adult, and also for the two industries that I'm in. So, as my day job, I still work as a community manager for a mobile gaming studio, and then with acting, like Vancouver's a hub for those two industries. So job-wise, like this is where I want to be at the moment, and I love like the Vancouver indie filmmaking community. I think overall they inspire me to want to be a better filmmaker, and it's nice knowing that you can reach out and have support. I think that's fundamental for whatever career you're pursuing, is you want to be where your people are.
For sure.
So I think that's been one of the things that I've been most grateful for this year, is realizing like that I have that community there. The indie game making community here is great too, and they were my first kind of friendship group. Like, if they didn't exist, shout out to Full Indie, which is a monthly indie game dev meetup. if they didn't exist, I wouldn't have any friends here. But now I've kind of transitioned to focusing more on the filmmaking community here. That said, Vancouver rains a lot, which is kind of, not ideal.
No, I know. I know.
And it's expensive here.
Yeah.
Outside of those two things, it's kind of a haven, I think, because
Yeah.
a lot of the world is in turmoil at the moment, or at least it feels that way. And Canada is like,
yeah, Canada just is always on the sidelines, like, okay, we're just gonna be over here.
Like we just legalized weed, and I mean that's got its own issues too.
Right? Yeah, it's always so complicated.
Yeah, I mean it feels safe, and I know that there are like fringe and extremist groups here, but for the time being, it feels okay.
I think out of any place in the world right now, it's damn near like one of the few places where like you said, you just feel safe. Like you can actually just feel safe.
Yeah.
With no strings attached.
Yeah.
Because that feeling does not exist in many places, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, being from Kenya, like I don't feel this feeling when I'm home,
Yeah. We were just watching something to do with the Wild West, or I don't know. We were watching some historical films on Netflix, and me and my boyfriend were talking about, wouldn't it be horrible to live in a time where, you just had to worry for your physical safety like at all times? And I was thinking, yeah, but that's still definitely the case for a lot of countries in the world right now.
Yeah. No, I when I visited home during the summer, I remember like, because this was the first time I visited home after going through a lot of like just like self-evaluation.
Yeah.
So I was like very attentive. And one of the things I really noticed was when I'm home, I'm so in touch with just mortality and being human. And because it's like you see sick people very often. You see like very poor people, like you just see it all, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then it's like on one street there's so much happening. There's like animals, there's people, there's children, there's cars, buses, and it's like there's so much happening that like, yeah, sure, you have your political views and stuff, but watch out, there's like so much shit happening around you that you know what I'm saying, you're more worried about like, okay, like let me just make it to where I'm going, and like you have a different mentality.
Yeah.
So it's like,
so I have to so what kind of different mentality is it?
So like, okay, for example, walking in the streets at 3 a.m. in the city doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't compute.
Yeah.
And like not leaving this is a good one, leaving electronics on your table, leaving backpacks like randomly, for like we're in the library right now. You flip this country and make this country Kenya, like so much stuff would have to be secured,
Yeah.
So like you're constantly checking stuff. Your windows have to be rolled in different parts of the city type thing. Whereas here it's like you could wear your headphones from Surrey to Delta and it'll be the same experience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you can just zone out. But there's that, like, I almost got carjacked my last night, like my last night home. So it was like, oh shit, yeah, it's real.
Yeah.
It's like, so, and it's not like it wasn't like a sad thing. It was just more so like that's just the reality, you know what I mean? It's a different, you're just using different muscles.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like when I'm here, I'm using a whole other set of things that I don't necessarily use when I'm back home.
Yeah.
Over here, it's much more cerebral and much more reading people and a lot more managing emotions and stuff.
Different, like rung on the hierarchy.
Yeah, kind of a thing. Yeah. So and then it's like different parts of the hierarchy are more intense than on different sides.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And
sorry, related question. I mean, so it's interesting. So I've never had to live in that kind of situation. And there have been times where I've felt negative and people will use as a response, think of people who,
in Africa or something.
I mean, does it give you a greater appreciation for life or make you more positive? Or
that's a good question. I think so. I think it does, for sure. But you know what I think we should correct about that statement is that, like, people in Africa are not like, woe is me, like, the road is too small for all the cars, so I have to walk on the dusty side. It's like, we don't care. Like, people here care about, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, here it's so cerebral, where you care about your looks and how you think about, and how people think of you and your identity. It's a lot more like, it's a lot more about, like, your, I don't know what to describe that as, but it's kind of like when
your self-actualization.
And like, and which can be a good thing too, because before I don't know if it's mixed in with my maturing here, but I feel like when I'm here I think a lot more about, I guess, that individuality. You know what I mean? I'm more of an individual and I'm here, and I get to, like, pick myself apart and learn myself in peace too, you know. That kind of helps, like being able to take random walks late at night. So in that sense, it's kind of like, I feel like in Africa we miss out on certain aspects of that. But on this side, like, the humanity is just like, if you compared, it's damn near, it feels almost like it doesn't exist here. Especially in Vancouver specifically. Like, people are just there. It just feels like people are just there, and like, you walk onto the bus, literally everyone is like this. And it's dead silent. And if you compare that in Kenya, for example, on public transit is the most chaotic, like, experience you can ever have, you know? So it's weird to come here and be in the public, like, you know, this is where the public is, but the public feels so silent and so, like, not together, and no one's looking at each other type thing. So
in Kenya, is it much more common to just, like, strike up a conversation with a stranger? And
oh yeah, for sure. And also you have no choice. We have the same population as here, but we're probably, like, smaller than BC. So, like, if you're in a lineup, like, people are literally standing, like, right next to you. It's like, so we're cramped up. You have no choice but to deal with people and, like, rub shoulders. And here there's so much space to just be yourself. So I guess those are a bit of the nuances.
There's space for everybody to be an island.
I think, like, I don't know if there's that ideal world where we can have both. I don't know which country has balanced them the best, because I feel like no country has it 100%. So I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I'm at a point now where I kind of want to travel more so that I can better understand what different cultures are like. I know that when I visited, like, China, the cramming aspect has felt very overwhelming because it feels aggressive. And I mean, there's different scales for what's considered polite, and I mean, I get it. Like, if you don't speak up, you'll get trampled, or you just won't get to your destination. So I get it. And it's like, you take that same culture and you put it here, and you're like, why do you need to be so aggressive? Like, everybody's going to get there on time. Like, it's going to be fine. But so I get it, but I am accustomed to space now.
Right? I feel you. It's tough. And I when you said that, it, like, struck a chord, because even me, myself, as a Kenyan, having been used to life here, when I go back and I see that kind of, like, different level of aggression, and it's like, you question it so much, like, why are people like this and this? And a lot of us people who've traveled outside have that experience where you go back home and you judge a lot of the stuff. But I was lucky to have older siblings who had traveled before me, and so I always saw them come home, have this, like, dissonance, and they go crazy and then go back, and it kept happening. So I was like, okay, I get it. So by the time I was going through it, it was kind of like, okay, center yourself, be calm, you know what's happening right now. It's funny, what would be the country of choice for you if you were to travel?
Right now, Japan. Just because I recognize that a lot of the media I've been watching has been Japanese, and I think I'm very interested in their food and culture. Specifically 2 shows on Netflix, one being Tokyo Diner Midnight Stories. It's basically a show with this kind of Japanese, like, chef who's a stoic cowboy, and it features a different story each episode. But it's just, I like the contemplative mood of it. And there's a different dish featured each episode. And then the other show being Terrace House, which is just like the slow burn romance reality TV show. And I am very interested in that, I think. Yeah.
Cool. And so like right now with your acting, is it okay if we mention where you're the show you're on right now?
Yeah.
So you're currently on Supergirl, right?
Yeah.
And it's on which network?
CW Network.
CW Network. And how did you get into that role?
So basically, anytime my agent sends me an audition, I do it.
Okay.
And I mean, I realize I'm really fortunate because I have a day job with flexible hours, and so I work 40 hours a week, but I get to choose where I put them. So I've been fortunate enough to never had to say no to my agent, which I know is not the case for some of my friends who have to like swap shifts or can't like get people to cover them. The week before I auditioned Supergirl, I booked another role on another TV show, which I don't think I can mention that one because that hasn't been out yet. Actually, no, it's on my IMDB.
Okay.
But Snowpiercer on the TNT network. And so that was like my first big kind of booking. And so I think I was already riding like a wave of confidence. There's an adage, probably for all industries, but acting in particular, where they're like, good things come in threes. And so one of my acting coaches mentioned, you'll notice sometimes it'll happen in threes. Like you book one thing and you're just riding that wave of confidence and you'll just like bam, bam, bam. So similar here, booked that, and then the week later did my audition for Supergirl. And it was just a very good week.
What's your role on Supergirl?
So her name's Mackenzie, and she's a rookie reporter, and she has an affluent background. I mentioned that she's friends with Oprah.
Okay, nice.
It's not written in the show, but I've decided that her goal in life is to win a Pulitzer Prize. And she she can be kind of rude at times, somewhat bitchy.
Yeah. Was that easy for you to access?
Oh, I mean, yeah, but it's funny because my friends or acquaintances, people I know, will say, "Oh wow, that character's so different from you." Part of it is like, I've alwaed been kind of a tomboy, and she's super feminine, and I mean, my hair and my makeup on the show is very different. She wears high-end clothes. Yeah. I bargain shop like there's no tomorrow. But it's funny because in my audition, the casting breakdown had said, okay, we don't want you to play this role bitchy at all. Like, no hint of bitchiness, just like down to earth, just very real. Don't overact anything. So I went in and I mean, the scene, which is very close to what's in the episode 1 of season 4. She basically steals a story from another reporter. My friend Aaron would say, "You didn't steal it. You were just doing your job, and you just did it better than her." And I'm like, "Thank you, Aaron. I love you." So it's written in a way where like the obvious thing is to play it bitchy. So I went in and I did my actor thing, just played it real grounded. And then they liked it, and then I booked it. And then it was funny because day 1 of shooting that episode, director was like, so can you just make her like bitchier? Just go over the top because we can always pull you back. And there's no too over. Yeah. And then I did it and he's like, no, more. Just like bitchier. Like just have fun with it. And I was like, have fun with it, you say? And it's funny because like most casting directors in town, and especially when I was starting out, my agent told me, the trend right now is to go very realistic, don't overact anything. So it was kind of fun to be able to go in that direction, just ham it up, and really try to play for the comedy.
And so what's the experience been like with the rest of the cast? Are you like working closely with the other actors?
So nice.
Yeah.
So I mostly work with Makad Brooks because on the show he's my boss because he's running Catco at the moment, and it's funny because on the show he's a straight character, whereas in real life I find him personally to be the funniest person on set. And it's interesting because I had a conversation with him the last time I shot where he was saying that he really wants to do comedy, and I can see why. He's just so naturally gifted with comedy. So it's interesting to have that conversation because I think overall there's a lot more drama that shoots in comedy, but comedy is so much harder. But I think, at least my perspective right now, is that comedy in a lot of ways is more valuable because life can get real dark and depressing, and it's harder to make somebody laugh than make them cry. And so if you can bring a bit of joy into somebody's life while still teaching them about the world, like that's so valuable. And you know, like the rest of the cast and the crew are super nice, and it's I think I've been on set like 4 or 5 times now.
Nice.
And I mean, I only go like every couple weeks or every month or something, but it's been enough times now that, you know, people are starting to learn my name, I'm starting to learn their names, and so it's starting to feel like a family, and it's starting to feel like my second job, which is nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're warm, and I also love seeing so many women on set.
Oh yeah.
That is definitely
Supergirl.
something I appreciate. The last episode we shot, the director was female, and it was interesting because I was wearing heels, and I don't normally wear heels. Like, I normally wear like boots because they're practical as fuck, or sneakers. But Supergirl is very, like, especially Catco is kind of not super high fashion, but I'm like, what are these floofy bits for? I guess floofy was like fashionable right now or something. So I tried to keep my heels on the entire shoot so I could get more used to them. And like after my first day shooting of Supergirl, I went home and bought heels so I could practice. But then the director noticed that my feet were hurting. She's like, oh, we need to get you like out of these right now, 'cause, like in between takes, because you know, and I know, because like when I am having a night out, like that's how I feel. And it was just, it's not that the male directors on the show have also been really warm, but it was just nice to have that kind of empathy. And I don't know, like she felt super approachable, and her background was she was a camera operator for a long time, so it's, you know, she kind of had that neat balance of empathy and technical skill, and I don't know, it was just nice.
And what about like with mental health and that stuff? I guess it's a never-ending battle for everyone. But would you say would you say you're at a place where you have a handle on most
Sometimes.
things? Yeah, than before.
I think it depends. I mean, as your life changes, you just need to adapt. Maybe the exercises that you need.
Or what? Maybe I should ask, what are the ways you're handling things now? Because I guess through life you learn different things in different stages to just deal with the next stage.
Yeah.
So what are you doing in this stage to handle it?
I prioritize exercise more now than I used to. I think in the last week, dance has kind of helped me in terms of exercising to relieve stress, but also creative expression to relieve stress. And also what I was saying before about giving myself empathy to just acknowledge and validate my own feelings and talk to people about it and not feel bad about it. I think oftentimes when you're struggling with negative emotions, you don't want to talk to other people about it because you don't want to bring them down.
No. Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because after kind of embracing with my counselor that validating your feelings by either saying it out loud to yourself, saying it out loud to somebody else, writing it down, helps you let it go. I think for the first time I genuinely felt like I wanted to be that person for other people. Because I think before I felt like I was encouraging them, but having a better understanding of how it helps them makes me more willing to put myself in a position where I can not necessarily take on their pain, but just be somebody who can help them release it. And it's not about giving them advice on how to get over it or whatever. It's just being there so that they can take that step to just say it. And also the other important thing that my counselor said was, you know, validating it, sometimes it takes more than once for you to be able to let it go. And I was like, oh, such a fundamental thing, but it's so easy to just, you know, write it down or talk to somebody and think, I still feel the same. I've gone for a run. I still feel the same. I'm always going to feel the same. So trying to do that better, you know, and communicate to my partner if I'm not feeling great. And I know it's a journey, but I think also, you know, embracing that I'm not going to be 100% overnight, and there's always going to be emotional challenges up ahead, but just trying to manage it better, I think. Yeah.
And do you still talk to your family often, or?
We have a group messenger.
We all do. WhatsApp or?
No, just Facebook.
Oh, okay, we do
I
WhatsApp.
I don't know. I don't really like WhatsApp. Yeah, and we talk occasionally. Like I'll Skype my mom every now and then.
Do you miss Australia at all, or no? No.
I think it's because I like my whole adult life has been here.
Yeah.
I miss the baked goods because cakes here suck.
A lot. Don't get me started on food, please don't, because I could go for a whole hour on what's wrong with everything we eat here, man. That's another thing. So like, food is just like.
I love food.
I'm
so
gonna
much.
stop. I can't do this.
Yeah.
So like, how do you feel about? What do you see for yourself right now in Vancouver? What are you trying to do for yourself? What do you want to do with acting, your professional life? What's like your ideal situation, and why?
So in the short term, producing that short film with Mick and Mike, and finishing this season of Supergirl, and I don't know, I'll be back for next year. I don't know, that'd be cool. Yeah. In the long run, I would love to be the lead actor on a long-running sitcom that I'm also the showrunner of. Okay. Similar to like Daniel Levy on Schitt's Creek.
Okay.
I really enjoy being in front of the camera, and I'm realizing that I like producing. And so I think just continuing to create my own content and building up my skill set, and learning to be a better person, learning more about the world, so that I can have the experience and network and skills to then build other people up when the time comes. I mean, not that you can't do it along the way, but just keeping that as
for sure
a continual motivation.
Yeah, I think it's always important to reach back, however, in whatever you're doing, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for making time for us to have this conversation. I think, like I said, I relate to a lot of the things like you spoke of about like your childhood and stuff, and obviously we spoke before, and I just find it interesting to always speak to new people and learn just how much we have in common. And it's so weird because it's like it's just the second time seeing you, but it's like all this stuff we've talked about is like everyone pretty much.
This is like a free counseling session, I'll be honest.
Hey, for me too. This is usually, I guess I'm cheating the system because I get to do this often, so like, haven't paid for a while. But yeah, no, I think it's so important just to talk. To end this podcast, direct us to any like website you have or any content you'd like us to see out there on social media or YouTube or anything.
I think just like probably my Instagram.
Yeah. Cool.
I haven't really set up a website yet because my other short film. Oh, actually, my Instagram is at Jaymee Mac, and then on Facebook and Instagram, at It's Not Me, It's Not You Film, which is a short film about a couple who are trying to figure out what to do when they realize that one of them is asexual. And speaking of using negative experiences, it's like I dated somebody who was asexual for not that the whole experience was negative because he was asexual. I dated him for over a year, somewhere like that, and I was struggling to like get over a lot of things in that relationship, so then I just made a film about it.
Wow, okay. Interesting. Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So is that how that's I'm not going to ask if it's vulnerable. That's obviously a vulnerable experience, right?
super raw.
Yeah.
But it's funny. I just got survey response back from one of my friends. She's an admin for AVEN, which is the Asexuality Visibility Education Network, I think is the full thing.
Wow, okay.
And it's a educational resource base, but also it's a forum online, like the biggest asexuality forum. And so she kind of helped educate me more about asexuality. And she also, sat down and Skyped Lee, who's my co-star in the film, because he plays the asexual character there. And having her feedback on the film makes me feel more comfortable about releasing it into the wild. And there's not a lot of content about asexuality right now.
Yeah, I'm totally lost on what.
Yeah, the most visible character is Todd Chavez in BoJack Horseman. But there's yeah, I'm very excited to have that film out there because I'm excited to see what discussions arise from that. And I was telling my friend Justine, who's the admin for Avon, that I think my job once we release the film, as opposed to me talking about my own experiences, that'll just be a starting point. My job after that will just be to listen to people who also have lived experiences and people who are asexual, the people in their lives, and then help provide a platform for them to share their voice. And maybe just bridge a gap more to the mainstream world, to people who otherwise might not have been exposed. And my hope is that, you know, the film will help explain a little bit more about what that experience is like, and also maybe be a cathartic experience for people who've been through similar things, because she said she watched the film on her break from work, and that was a mistake because she was like tearing up.
Oh no. That's a good and a bad thing at the same time.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, all the best once it's all out, and
Thanks.
yeah, and good luck with your future in film and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I look forward to also following your journey.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone who's tuned in on video, audio, however you're experiencing this conversation. We've had our lovely guest Jaymee Mack on the show, and look out for her on your local billboards and on IMDB and all that good stuff. Autographs if you see her in the supermarket.
Oh my god.
She's free to sign.
I'll be by the bread section.
But yeah, thank you for joining us and making time for this, and I'm really grateful that you were sharing what you shared, and yeah, thank you for joining us. Peace. If you'd like to be a guest on the Represented Podcast, feel free to hit up at Represented Podcast on Instagram or email us at representedpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and for more Geek Happy Network shows like the Monster Slayer's Guide to Slaying Monsters, or partner shows like the Jay and Tay Show and Book and Bitch, come give us a listen at geekhappynetwork.com or look for us on your favorite podcast app. And be sure to follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Geek Happy Network. This show is hosted and created by myself, Nyex, editing by Robert Mudhama, and myself, video editing by Russ Rara, and intro music by Mick Narciso.
Geek Happy Network.